order. Ms. Meeker, would you please take the roll?
Ms. Boucher.
Here.
Ms. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Hastings.
Here.
Ms. Higgins. Mr. Richards.
Here.
Ms. Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Sadowski.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Here.
And I am here. So we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. We have a number of things to go over after our 2 public hearings last week and some decisions start to make. It looks like that we have a lot of the material we requested in front of us, including a summary of all the line item adjustments in the budget, the capital improvement plan, and a new proposal on something else. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dunn.
Yep, okay. So try to do the budget's additions and subtractions. So the first sheet you should have in front of you, it says Board of Ed, page 53 to 55. The budget book version 1.1, which was the latest one we handed out. That just is explaining what each of the lines are, where the differences as it relates to what that item is. So for example, you see the first one is the local property taxes. The second one is a payment in lieu of taxes. That's a pilot program that the city signed that gives us money for an organization here that does not pay property taxes. They pay a tax in lieu of property tax. So we went through each of the lines and just explained what each of those were. And if you have more questions, I won't go through each of these. Again, these were in your budget book, but we just called them out and I wrote on because you were asking about the adds and subtracts. And I'll do the next one, and then if you have questions, we can hit those, if that's okay. The next one is just the line items adjustments. And what we did is tried to narrow it down to 10,000 or more where it would swing one way or another. Okay, so this way we got it to 2 pages. I did put in your folder all the, if they didn't buy a book that was $19.99, you're not going to see that on here. It may have been in last year's budget, but we reduced it this year. All those are in your budget folder, just because I didn't want to try to do a voluminous amount of paper. I wanted the ones that would impact the budget. So if you take the first line item here, it says contracted service, which is the RMS resource officer for $101,000. As you could see, the change greater than 10,000, less than 10, that's an add. The next line, you could see we went from 64,000 for Medicaid service down to 45. We had negotiated with a new carrier, so that's a reduction. So that's what we did in each of the sections of the budget.
Gotcha.
And if there's ones in particular you want to talk about, we can go over that at some whenever. When you get towards the end is where you see the changes in the debt service, because every year your debt, your existing debt will go down. If you add new, like this year, it goes up, but then it begins to go down. One of the few items that when you hit, it begins going down after you've entered into that obligation. Questions? And we can always come back to it too. You want to take
Are we
time to
not
look through it?
paying for for security awareness training anymore?
So security and awareness, we're moving from what was used to be called No Before, and we got a different solution because it can do security as well as other things. So it's expanded.
So is it in another line item in the budget?
So up top.
It looks like just a negative.
Yep, let me find the 11,000 that's there. I wish I had line numbers on here. So if you see that, it says replaced with Vector Solutions.
Yep.
And then let me just find that number. If you go down to the line before the 243,881, it says 13.7. It says replaces No Before. Right under the diesel, right after the diesel fuel.
Okay.
We tried to marry everything of what was a wash, and if it was new, it was new. We've also tried to
Yeah,
reclassify some things that repairs, like our time clocks was under a contracted service, but it's really repairs and maintenance. So,
Quickie question.
yeah.
Why are we paving at White Farm? Why is that our responsibility? Is it because we pay for the whole program?
Are you on the capital facilities?
Yeah, she's.
One-
Oh,
she's
could
on a
you just
different
stay
one.
with this one?
Yeah,
You're on a different one.
I'm on this one.
Yeah, we're on the.
We're on this.
We're looking
Line
at, we're
items.
the 6-point font.
Oh,
document.
Jesus, all right. Pardon me.
We'll get to that
Pin, put a pin in that.
one. Did we cancel Lexia? Are we canceling?
Yes. Yeah, only one of the schools had really wanted it. If you
So
want
what
to
are we
speak to
using
it.
in replacement, to replace that?
We're gonna keep Lexia Pro, which comes out of John's budget for special ed students at the high school. Lexia now does all of the work that iReady now does all of the work with Lexia.
Okay.
Grades 3 through 5, and the option is for schools to use their own funds if they want to get it for K through 2.
Okay.
It was duplicative.
Okay.
Do you have anything?
I'll just add in that we have the Title I schools. We went and we surveyed all the schools, and we kind of said who's using this Lexia versus using iReady right now, and it came down that there's only really at the primary levels are using it, but those are also our higher Title I schools, so they do have funding for that, and we're able to shift that funding from Title I. They want to use it for the primary grade levels and get it there. And I'll continue to supply, as Kim said, Lexia Pro for the students, both for our ML populations and our special ed populations.
So does that mean all the elementaries will still have access to Lexia except Abbott Downing?
And if Abbott needs it, they can certainly talk to us, and we can look at other blended funding for that. But as an overall arching by a site license, we weren't utilizing it
Okay.
in that point for $70,000.
That's
We just weren't utilizing that much.
Got a couple.
Okay.
Mr. Dunn, is staff not on this one?
It's on the screen.
But it's not on this paper that you gave
No,
us?
no, that's just all the line item detail.
Okay. And on those, 80,000 for professional development?
Yep.
Is that for the year?
Yes.
And that's all staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't include the CBA stuff that they have. That's all, that didn't change because whatever's collectively bargained. This is,
Okay. What is TCP hardware and maintenance?
that's Time Clock Plus, that's the time clock system,
And we pay for that each year?
correct?
Okay. The special ed transportation, 850,
Yep,
buses and vans, is that what we're talking about?
yep, and you see the 150 above it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we split it between homeless and special ed transportation. That's the million that's offset by the transfer from the special ed trust fund.
Okay. And again, the athletics for the high school is that much? Almost $6,000?
Is that the, it says dues
mileage,
fees?
mileage only?
So what happens, in order to track the mileage for each either field trip or athletic group, when they put in their request to transportation,
Yep.
they say, okay, where they're going to and from, they calculate the mileage, and that's what comes out. So the amount you see for $342,000, there's an amount, and then there's an offset, so it nets to zero. So there's no budgetary impact. It's just for the purposes of tracking mileage and the trip. And it's a way to kind of put a buffer on just field trips proliferating. They know they have a budget to work with, and that's how we track it, based on miles. The expenses are all coming out of the transportation budget, but we don't carve out every little
But we're
piece
still
of-
paying 11,000 for athletics to travel throughout the year.
It's what we estimate based on the miles. That's the value of it.
Okay. And, sorry, we're not talking this one yet, right?
Well, does anyone else have any other questions on this one? I mean, we've talked about a lot of these in big picture items.
Can I just make a clarifying statement?
Yep.
So for anybody who's listening or watching hasn't and has brought up a concern about the $1 million for vans, please know that doesn't mean we're definitely going to go out and buy all these vans, spend $1 million. This is in the budget. We're going to explore the opportunities. It does not mean tomorrow we're going to go out and buy a bunch of vans.
In addition, I'll be clarifying the word vans.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Other questions on this document? Okay.
Okay? So we can move on next to the big sheet. That's the
that's what my
16-point
question
font or 24-point font, maybe.
Because Matt likes us, unlike Jack.
His admin assistant, his admin assistant is very nice.
Are you going to show that, Jack, or just talk to it? Everyone has a copy of the capital improvement?
Yeah, they should have it. in
Can
front
you
of
put
them.
it up? Do you
Yeah,
have
I
it
can
put
work
up?
to do that while he starts
Okay.
explaining.
So,
All of these documents will be on the website.
so if we remember back to December 5th of '24, we had a capital facilities committee meeting, and we talked about the capital improvement plan. And in that meeting, the first line on there was a landscaping plan. What I kind of wanted to do tonight is talk to you folks about that. We put in our strategic plan from 2022 to 25, we put in to upgrade our outside facilities and put in a landscaping plan. We had the opportunity last year, and I think a lot of you will remember, due to staffing shortages, we had an outside contractor come in. They mowed all 14 of our different lawns and properties, sometimes twice a week, but definitely once a week. What I'm proposing, what I'd like to have you folks consider, is a landscaping plan that includes spring and fall cleanup, cleaning up all the branches around the property, disposal after each mowing, refresh the mulch beds, and mitigate any of the weeds throughout. Pruning trees and shrubs, weed whacking, mowing up to 2 times a week. We commonly are mowing the Rundlett fields close to twice a week during the height of the summer. And we have to, any rain delays we have, that pushes us out further. I've got 5 maintenance employees in the district. We have a little over 1 million square feet of schools. I have 2 that are currently out, and we're hoping it doesn't happen, but could be out for the summer, leaving us with 3 maintenance folks. I think now is as good a time as ever to have this conversation. Kathleen and I talk about it frequently. You judge a book by its cover. Last year was an eye-opener for all of us. We could get all of the lawns and grounds maintained, and we could utilize our current maintenance folks to go in the buildings and fix doors and do all sorts of other things that they're unable to do when we dedicate so many resources to, and time to keeping the grounds look good. So I'm happy to answer any.
Matt, I know you are aware that at Broken Ground, I know, and maybe other schools do it as well, at least in the spring, they have a school, I don't remember what they call it, but
Like a field day?
it's a volunteer day, and
Yep.
parents come in and we get the mulch donated, and the kids do it, they plant bulbs for the spring, and my experience with that was that the students then take better care, not running through the flowers, not doing all that, they did the work.
That still happens, and it happens not just over there, it happens at Beaver Meadow, Abbott Downing. The high school has done that from year to year. We are so grateful for those types of volunteerism and helping, but it's what I'm also talking about is the maintenance throughout the season.
Right.
And
I was just wondering if we could take the mulching and planting and things like that off, would it give you more resources for the lawn mowing and other things? If we had all of the schools sort of do an adopt-a-spot program, if you will, for
Well,
for their flower beds and their mulching and that kind of stuff.
I definitely think that we will take that up as any option that could be. We would love that. But again, maintaining all the spring cleanup, we need to get out there, get all the grounds clean. I think of Beaver Meadow with all the pine needles and the storm drainage that gets clogged up. We just can't keep up with it. And I think it would be extremely beneficial, not just for aesthetics, but also for functionality of the schools, if we could consider this.
Does this include getting the grass to grow?
Getting it to grow.
Are you talking
I'm talking about everywhere.
broken ground, all the, you know, the hard packed from this kids not using
Sure.
the actual pathway at CMS. So now you know grass is going to grow if it's hard packed.
Well, for those kinds of considerations,
Yeah.
I would put that in the RFP when we go out for bid on it, if that's what you so choose. It's probably going to add a little bit more, or we're going to have to sacrifice other things off, which we can do. But I know what you're saying. There's a high acid level over at Broken Ground and Beaver Meadow, making it tougher to grow. So, yeah, we could certainly add that. I'd like to, but I'm trying to be conscientious as
Yeah, I didn't know
well
if it
of the
included
cost.
that.
Kara, you had a question?
Yeah. Just very quickly on the spreadsheet itself, from what I understand, the total down at the bottom for proposed fiscal year 26 is $703,000. This $100,000 proposal is adding to that total, correct?
It is.
Okay.
It
So
is.
everything that has an asterisk is currently in our budget.
So let's talk that through a little bit. Jack and I had been working together back in December, and we, you know, this number that I had for 2025 was in excess of, it was a little over $1 million, not the $1,051,000. It was, I think, about 1.1. I'd go back and look. So before that December meeting, we had to put asterisks in, and, you know, that meeting would be designed to pick and pull to try to make that number fit. Because I think the intention was to keep the tax rate low, obviously, and by doing so, essentially I was looking at $700,000 to do all the work in the district, which was less than what we had planned in accordance with our capital improvement and strategic plan. So I put it in to this for us to evaluate, but I also had to take some monies out of other things to
Okay.
try to make the number work.
So you're saying that the $700,000 is the total even with this new proposal? Because I feel
Well,
like the
yes.
700,000 was your original ask.
It was, so in
And-
order
But now
to
we've got an
maintain,
additional 100,000.
so in order to maintain that, I had to
So
remove
you've
some
balanced.
things.
So you're not adding to your.
So what did
essentially-
you
No,
remove?
I'm not adding.
I think is,
I took the HVAC cleaning, and I'm considering pushing that out. I trimmed back on the painting. We normally had spent roughly $100,000 for painting district-wide. So I took some monies out of there. The BMS ledge repair, I had a quote for $212.
Yeah.
But I want to get with and rework and see what we can do with that to trim some monies out. This isn't official yet. I haven't gone out for bid on anything, but much like we would do in our households, we're trying to look at what we have and look what needs to be done and see what we can do to shuffle things around a little bit. We had $50,000 was a guesstimate by another from our civil engineer for a traffic study. So I thought we could save a little bit and come down to about 42.5, which isn't huge. But I just really tried to scrutinize everything that we had to do this summer, and in order to make the 100,000 work for lawn service, I needed to try to adjust things, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm appreciative of the questions, and I really want to fight for that particular part of the budget because I think it's important.
Mr. Richards.
So, I was looking into this and went through, and just for general information, you guys can do the math, is that for these type of buildings, you should budget between 2 and 5% of the replacement cost of the buildings to have annual maintenance, to be able to do what the people who came here and testified said we should do, is maintain all of our buildings, which means if you're going to start doing 2 to 5%, think about the replacement cost of those buildings. I'd put back the money to make it $1 million if it was me, because that's not even close to doing the maintenance that we should be doing in these buildings. Our newest elementary schools are 12 years old, over 12 years old. And it's, we need to do, we've heard it from the community, you need to spend the money to do maintenance. And, that balanced, I'm not quite ready to put $2 million in this budget for maintenance, even though that would be still below the recommended amounts. I do want to add some back in because this is, if you want to know, this is when we're looking at how we can keep the tax rate low, this is where we have cut each of the 11 years that I have been involved in the budget. It's, we don't cut teacher salaries, we don't cut benefits, so we don't, we negotiate some better, contractual items, but in the end, there's only a certain amount of money that we can spend on maintenance, and we always cut maintenance. We stop painting a few rooms each year, a little less than we should. We buy furniture a little less than we should, and so, personally, I'm fine with the 703. I actually would probably like to increase it by about 150.
Is that a motion?
I will make a motion to increase the budget for capital improvements by, essentially what I was looking at is, the HVAC cleaning and about half of the furniture. And that would be about 150 additional thousand on this. Because I think I know it's very tight. I think there might be some other areas we can, cut and be a little more judicial on, but I think for long-term, and that's what I look at here, is the long-term health of the community and the school district. I would make that motion.
I'm seconding it.
Moved by Mr. Richards, second by Ms. Boucher. Discussion?
You sold me on it, Jim.
Where's the furniture, Jim?
Furniture upgrades was taken out. It's 116,000. And, I don't know that we're replacing furniture that often, but Matt, can you
We're not.
speak to that?
We've tried to get better, but as you know, that it's a pretty expensive endeavor. And one of the things we like to try to focus on, if we're going to replace, we don't just want to replace 1, 2, or 3 classrooms. We'd like to do roughly 10 if we could, because you get a better impact and it's a little bit more equitable, I think, if you could do more.
Yeah, but 10 classrooms, and people say, wow, 10 classrooms. It's 10 classrooms across all of the different schools, right? It's just 10 classrooms total.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, think of schools like Broken Ground, and I think we had some furniture monies in for Broken Ground. Some of that furniture is recycled from overages we had when we built the 3 elementary schools. Some we've done tidbits here and there, but a lot of it is still old furniture. So
And by furniture, we're talking about desks and chairs.
desks and chairs, some,
Mostly.
teachers' desks, that
Desks,
kind of thing.
Ms. Meeker?
For clarification purposes, how much was budgeted for that in our posted budget for capital facilities? Is it this number? The $703,000?
700,000.
Okay.
Summer projects alone,
Okay,
700.
so the motion is to increase that budget to 850. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just wanted clarification on the
Correct.
motion. And
Done.
And is that sort of, are we considering that a general addition to the capital facilities fund, or is this project specific to furniture and, what was the other thing? HVAC cleaning?
I personally wanted to add the 150 for those items. However, I'm open to discussion from anyone. That's what I saw as the most critical items that I felt impacted our students the most. But, I'm more than willing to discuss it.
Can we take the 150 from the trust fund?
I suppose we can
we
do
already
whatever
have
we want with that
350.
trust fund, yes.
You can, you're already taking 350 to make up the 700.
But we have 12 million in there, right?
Oh,
you're
no, not
different.
No,
that
not
isn't
that one.
trust. We're talking about the school building maintenance fund. So that
the
right now should have
So
about.
the facilities trust fund that we have,
There's 2 different trust
two different
funds.
ones.
There's
The one
one
that has
for
a-
maintenance and one for renovation and construction.
so it's only for renovation and construction
It
then?
is, we as a board could vote to move that
Move
money
money.
if we chose. Matt, would you have other priorities for an additional $150,000?
I would, once all the bids came in, I'm hoping that it would be a little bit under, and then I would like to do more projects. Specifically to this, I can come back on Wednesday and talk about those.
Okay, so, because I
Yeah.
understand Mr. Richards' priorities, but I would be interested
Sure.
in hearing where you want to, where you think the money would be the most useful, because I know we're comparing to 2025, so I'm not sure if our furniture needs are the same, although I understand. And I do agree that gradually increasing our investment in maintenance, although that would still be below last year, is important. Although I will say, once again, just for the record, that that would not have kept us from the needs that we have at Rundlett Middle School
Oh, for sure.
now.
Right.
Those, you know, the issues at Rundlett go are far bigger than, you know, painting and regular maintenance and desks, and they're everything from expensive HVAC, outdated electrical, to the fact that, you know, it's not a very accessible building, so.
Correct.
Ms. Campbell?
I just want to clarify, though, nowhere in next year's budget do we actually have money set aside for Memorial Field, right? That would be separate from
There is
the budget for
nothing
next
set
year?
aside
Yeah.
at Memorial Field at this point.
Okay,
What we potentially would be looking at is design.
right.
Yep.
Yep.
Ms. Meeker?
I would just say that I would be comfortable with allowing an increase or negotiating an increase, a motion to increase the capital facilities budget that allows capital facilities to determine the best use of those funds. I'm not sure a presentation between now and Wednesday
Yeah.
is going to get us where we need to be as far as what Matt needs. And we have the list of the constraints are in front of us, and we are trusting our capital facilities manager to use that money in the best way possible. I think we can all see how frugal Matt is and how cautious he is with funds. So I would be comfortable with not seeing an additional presentation.
Is that a friendly amendment to the current motion?
Well, I think the current motion is to increase
Just
it.
increase
It's
the
just
amount.
to increase the
Without
amount.
specification?
My motion is to increase that amount. I stated where I thought I saw, but as Ms. Meeker so appropriately points out, Mr. Cashman and his staff are far more qualified than I am to, you know, prioritize. So I am more than happy with, you know, that approach.
And Mr. Cashman also is very good about bringing this for further discussions to capital facilities, which then presents to the full board on this. Further discussion,
I do move, I have an amendment to the motion.
okay?
I would like to reduce the increase from 150,000 to 100,000. And I would like half of it to come from trust fund money at the discretion of the business manager.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails.
Oh, it does?
It's okay.
If there's no
it's all right.
second,
All right.
There was no second.
there's no second. Although we can continue this discussion as we go through
Yeah.
the budget.
Would it help for you to see what's in the trust fund? Do you need to see that?
You certainly can tell us what's in that trust fund
Right.
right now. I'm sure Jack can tell us
Yes, what's in
immediately.
that trust
I
fund
think
for
we're
maintenance?
projected to have 1.8 million.
Just so you know.
Okay.
I mean, my concern about the trust fund is I would like to take it from there, but also that trust fund is our emergency money if a roof
Like
collapses.
The Rundlett roof that is needs to be.
or,
Yeah.
you know, we have to replace an HVAC system, you know, that just scratches the surface of an HVAC system, as we've all known. But, you know, that's our sort of emergency money for that type of thing. We could start taking out of the renovation trust, although I think, you know, what we've been trying to do for a number of years is be in a place where we can, when if and when we build a new middle school, we can offset the tax increase so that it, is not as, we can buy down the tax increase cost to make it a little more palatable. Ms. Meeker?
I would say we are currently taking what our current budget is at 700,000, half is coming from our trust fund. So if we add an additional 100,000 and half of that is going to come from a trust fund, then we're adding an additional 50,000 to come from the trust fund, or 75,000 if we land at 150. So the nature of my motion was really to keep us in balance with what we are in practice trying to do this year, which is lean on our trust fund in a tight year economically, so that it doesn't increase the tax rate any more than it needs to.
Well, now that you've explained it, I would second that motion.
Well,
So is that a second to that?
We need a new motion.
We need a new motion, but Sarah raised her hand first.
I was actually going to say yes. I was disappointed the whole amount wasn't coming from the trust fund, because I think that's what we've heard from the public pretty consistently.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll make a new motion to change it to $100,000 with 50,000 of that.
100 or 150,000?
well, my motion was to reduce the current motion of 150
Right.
to 100,000, and to split it evenly between the trust fund. So
Yeah,
Are you making a new one from, so this is a new
This
motion?
is an amendment.
It's
Or is
an-
it an amendment?
It's an
to hers?
amendment to Jim's motion.
Okay, to Jim's motion,
Yeah.
for the
Right.
150.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so 50% would come from the maintenance trust fund, and, which would be $50,000. And what was the additional 50 was just general fund?
would come from
Would
general
come from
fund.
general fund. Okay, that's the motion that I'm gonna make. It's a
I-
tight year. I wanna give Matt everything that he needs. And additionally, we have other $100,000
But
ticket
it's not,
items
it's
on
not
here.
100,000, it's 150,000.
No,
She's
my
making
motion is
an
for
amendment
100.
to change it to, from,
But
she's
she
gonna make,
said to yours.
No, she's amending his motion to reduce, he moved
150.
150.
I
She's
moved,
amending
changing it to just
She's
100.
making an
Change-
amendment
okay,
to
that's
change
what I
it to
didn't hear.
100.
That's
Okay.
okay, no worries,
Okay.
happy to talk it out.
Mhm.
So that's the motion I made.
Is there-
Seconded.
Second by Ms. Meeker. Discussion.
I feel like it strikes a balance of being, fiscally responsible, if you will.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think, the presentation of our schools is not only important, but this is space that is being used by our community after school on the weekends. So it's not only a benefit to our students and staff, it is a benefit to our community. And honestly, it's a safety issue, because when you've got, fields that are not as good as they could be, then you increase the risk of injury.
Pivots, holes,
Yeah.
all the things.
Mr. Richards.
so, although I feel like the 150,000 is absolutely justified, I understand the points being made by Ms. Robinson and Meeker, and I am more than willing to compromise
Cool.
on that.
So
Love
you
that.
accept the motion?
I-
Accept the friendly amendment?
Uh,
Or do you want a separate vote?
I accept the friendly amendment as if this Ms. Boucher, who seconded my
Second.
amendment, agrees.
She has to,
Do you
she has to
Yeah,
agree.
I will agree with it, only if that's the way that we're gonna pass it.
Then don't agree with it and let's vote on the amendment.
Then just vote on the
No,
amendment.
Let's vote on the amendment.
All right.
Because I want to do the 150.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, yeah.
All those in favor of Ms. Robinson's amendment?
Aye.
Can I have a roll call,
Yeah.
please?
Yes, you can. Ms. Boucher,
No.
Ms. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Hastings,
No.
Mr. Richards,
No.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Sadowski,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
No.
and I am a yes. We are 4-4.
Tied.
Oh, this is
missing
why
out
you
on
have
the
an odd number of board members.
So the president has to make the vote, right?
No, actually, it didn't, the amendment, doesn't the amendment?
The amendment
Amendment
fails.
fails.
Oh, okay, so now,
You vote
It is
on
open to further amendments.
Or do we vote on?
We could open on Jim's. If someone wants to amend Jim's to take half from the trust fund, that is an amendment you could do as well.
I would like to make a friendly amendment that we do the 150 and we take it all from the trust fund.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Sarah's on it tonight.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Discussion, I was,
Please explain your motion.
yeah.
Well, I think that we did hear from the taxpayers that they would like us to use the trust funds. $75,000 if a roof blows off, I'm not sure is going to fix it. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I think our roofs are in fairly good shape. I'm not too concerned about that. If they didn't blow off, if they didn't blow off after the wind we've had this week, then hopefully they will not. And I think it's a way that we can continue the maintenance of the buildings, which needs to be done, and use the money that we've been saving to do it.
Ms. Meeker?
Point of clarification, did you say 75,000, but your motion is for the full amount of the increase to come from the trust fund?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Trust fund, the
the-
maintenance?
either maintenance or
No, which one?
Maintenance should be the way.
maintenance would be used up,
You
maintenance.
said 150,000
Yes.
coming from the maintenance.
the maintenance.
trust. Ms. Meeker?
I would just.
Oh, I see what you said when I said
Right,
75.
so just to remind the board, right now, we are currently taking $350,000 from the trust fund to cover half of the $700,000 budget. This would increase the trust fund decrease to $500,000. It's a little bit too steep of a dip for me, because the fund does have only 1.8 million, and I think we're getting into a point where we're lower than is recommended. Is that correct?
I think the thing you got to think about is when you go into next year's budget, if you lower the amount, we've gradually moved it up 125, 250, 350.
Right.
Now 700 the last 2 years using 350 out of those reserves. If you go and use 500 and you lower the budget, now you're going to be at what 200,000 in general fund and 500,000 in one time. So when I lower this next year, when you see, you're going to see the spike because you're pulling in one time. And if this lawn service is going to continue, which I'm surmising next year will be in as a contracted service and stay,
Yeah.
you're going to just have a different hill to climb. That's all. As you're seeing, we went from last year to this year with the reserves. We're trying to fade it, phase you
Yeah.
back in, coming post-COVID, post-ESSER. That's the only thing. But you also have to see what the state does, and you have the opportunity to touch this again in October. So we can always adjust it. When I get to my other agenda item as it relates to public comment, trust funds will be discussed, but I'll let you continue on.
Any further discussion? We have a discuss, we had a
You
second.
said.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
Could we please clarify what the motion is?
The motion is 100 to amend Mr. Richards' motion to take the entire $150,000 of the building maintenance trust fund.
Okay, thank you.
All those
Oh,
in,
can I just say one
Yes.
thing? My concern is we don't know what's gonna happen when we look at that roof at Rundlett. So I just really wanna be mindful of
I
what
think
gets
that's
taken out of the
legitimate.
maintenance fund.
I think it's also, these are ongoing costs. So if you start taking them out of the budget, then you don't have money to do ongoing maintenance costs in your budget. And so, to push it back up, to try and balance that out a little bit in a tough year by taking some for the trust fund, I think we do. But if we take all of it from the trust fund or the majority of it from the trust fund, then
We're gonna have to beg for it from the general fund.
we're not, then next year's tax rate is gonna pay a bigger price. Mr. Cashman?
I just want to address that for a second. So the 10,000 is to do a moisture test on the roof. We'll get a very, very good analysis from that. And then from that, by you folks opening a little bit more for us to utilize, we will be able to do, I can't tell you how much yet until we know all of the issues with the roof, but we can now try to conquer more with repairs on the roof over at Rundlett by what you're doing here tonight. So that's a good thing.
The 106,000, almost 107,000 for the interior HVAC dusting that Mr. Richards was discussing earlier, if you were to use this extra for that, is that an every year thing, or is that a one-time?
No, it's you should do it about every 10 years. So the way I had it in the long-range capital plan was to do a couple schools each year so that
Right.
you're doing the function of cleaning, but you're doing it at a different school.
So it could be about the same amount, but just different schools next year?
Right. And
So that is an ongoing,
it's an ongoing thing to
Okay.
spread out over 10 years to get everyone caught up.
yep, I understand. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of Ms. Hastings, we're voting on Ms. Hastings' motion to take 150,000 additional out of the maintenance trust fund. All those in favor?
Aye.
I don't know.
It's
All those opposed?
Aye,Ll say aye.
Aye.
Nay is the
Nays
right
have
word.
it.
Yeah, sorry.
We are back to Mr. Richards' original
party needs a
motion,
pooper.
which is to amend the building, amend the capital facilities budget for summer maintenance projects to increase it by $150,000. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
The original one.
Yes.
Was that the full 150.
Yes,
Come out of,
the general fund.
of the general fund.
Okay. Should I call that vote again?
Yes, please.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
Okay, all right.
4-3?
Yeah.
5-3.
Voice vote.
But it's not technically a roll call.
5-3.
All right,
4-3.
let's move on to the next item. It's a roll call. It's not, it's a voice vote.
Oh, yeah. My bad.
So we moved it up to 150?
Okay, this is how the sausage is made.
That's pretty.
All right, what's next?
Yeah.
Okay, did that. We still, I have the staffing adjustments that we discussed about on the screen. And I think, let me just go back to my agenda, sorry, one second. Let me just make sure that I'm capturing. So we did, that carries over a bit to the DIJ Restorative Justice and the School Resource Officer. If I could stick with those ads. So if it's okay, I'll start with the one that has the orange on top, the orange banner, and then the one that was sent out to you that says DIJ Restorative Justice Position History, Current and Future. And I'll let you, again, as I mentioned, in the budget is this gives you the full history of it, but in the budget is the 136 for that position, as well as some grant-funded positions. And you had a board member that also put something there, Miss Meeker, so I'll let her speak to her paper, but you have at least a history of the position and then some suggestions. Good?
Thank you. So Jack is right. The sheet that you have in front of you that has orange at the top. This is my third budget cycle, so hopefully everybody remembers that by now I usually bring a spreadsheet to help me organize my thoughts around motions that I plan on making. This is specific to personnel. There are 3 proposals or motions that I'm going to make tonight that are based on what our ongoing discussions and also what was presented to us by Jack by email, just about the history of the positions and sort of where we're at. I'm going to just kind of explain them generally. You'll see that there are 3 ideas of mine. One is to remove the role of the safety resource officer from the budget at a reduction of $101,000. The other is to add a combined restorative justice, juvenile justice officer position, description TBD, to the personnel budget line item for $100,000. The reason I am making this proposal is written briefly on this sheet, but in some, there has been both positive and negative reaction to the idea of a police officer being stationed at our school in a permanent position, but that there is no doubt that there is a need at the middle school that I feel needs to be addressed using creative thinking, using compromise, because we have an administrator and we have a staff that have identified a need. I sat with Jack and Kathleen last week to kind of talk about this, what that would look like. If anybody doesn't already know, for instance, there's a social worker working for the Concord PD right now that is receiving a lot of praise for being in the legal environment but offering social work services, social support services. And I think we can come up with something very cool in the same vein. Unfortunately, because of the budget cycle timing, there's really not time to develop this and have a job description ready to go. So the compromise was to sort of put the budgetary item in the budget and then allow our principals, our administrators to come together and figure out what that might look like with a focus on social work, social support, with perhaps somebody with a juvenile justice background. I'm going to go through it, and then no motions have been made, so I'm just describing the sheet as of right now. The third proposal is to remove the Director of DEIJ from the budget at a reduction of $136,071. We have recently signed on with Great Schools Partnership to conduct an equity audit and evaluation of our district. That has been done essentially in lieu of a director filling that doing that task, because that position has been in the budget but is currently unfilled. I feel that it would be redundant to put it in the budget while also employing Great Schools Partnership. Mm-hmm. That contract ends in 2026, so I think it is worth essentially putting a pin in that position until next year when that contract is up. I will start with my first motion, and sorry, go ahead.
Well, since they all go together, I think it doesn't make sense to do individual...
Separate motions? Okay.
Separate motions. So if you want to make it one motion for discussion purposes,
Sure.
I think that would
Is everybody okay
make
with
the
that?
most sense, because...
Okay, so last year you guys wouldn't let me do it in bulk, so I'm surprised you're going to let me do it this year.
Board's a new board.
All right.
Different things.
All right,
This
so...
is all one thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I move personnel adjustments to the budget as follows. Remove the safety resource officer from the personnel budget. Remove the director of DEIJ from the personnel budget, and add a restorative justice / juvenile justice position to the personnel budget for a total change in budget of negative $137,000. $137,725.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Meeker, seconded by Ms. Robinson, and it is open for discussion. Ms. Robinson, and then Ms. Hastings, and then Mr. Richards.
I have a question that I think administrators can answer. If an SRO were to be put into the middle school, would that person be allowed to restrain a child if they were a danger to themselves or others?
I think that's a great question. And in fact, there have been situations at the high school, I'm going to use that as an example, where a student the staff needed some support.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have requested support from the SRO at the high school when we have a student. You know, you got to remember the size of the kids and who's involved in the maintenance of it. And they have, in fact, that has occurred. It usually is related to mental health issues, and you know that.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to think that they're called in because a youngster is running around the school.
Right.
It's a situation where they're going to need to in many cases, it's at least my experience has been that they needed to transport to the hospital, and so we've had to do that.
The reason I asked that question is because I think what we're really dealing with here is a sense of teachers feeling not physically capable of handling behavioral issues in the school, because we do have strict parameters around physical contact in schools. So I think that's a part of the conversation that has not been said out loud, that we do. And so if having an SRO or as long as we have a position that allows for safe restraint of students for their own safety and the physical safety of others, I think that's really a linchpin in this conversation that we're not having.
Well, as you know, all, our staff is trained in restraint.
But I mean, we're
There
talking
is
about the size of the
occasion-
kids
that's
too,
There are-
right?
Even at the middle school, you have some youngsters that are good-sized youngsters.
Yeah.
And as you know, that when their own personal regulatory systems shut down on them, they're very difficult to handle. So
Right.
you're right. We do have people trained and they know what to do, but we have asked for support. And of course, our administrators are also trained in that, where they can do that same task. And
Yeah, I'm just trying to like drill down to like this burning need for the specific type of person. And I think there's like this very general, I mean, in low murmurs around the community, there's a lot of behavioral issues at the middle school level for obvious reasons. I mean, besides mental health, kids are going through puberty. It's a very competitive environment, yada, yada, yada. I think that Ms. Meeker's proposition of a juvenile justice officer, a restorative justice position, if we can give that person some of the same liberties
They would have to be trained
That's
in
what
that.
I'm saying, yeah. If we're looking for that kind of physical intervention that I think some teachers don't feel confident doing, then like, let's just name the things that we actually really need. You know what I mean?
So I asked Jay to come to the table because I think he can give you a little bit more fact. His boots are on the ground. He's there every day.
Fill us in.
Yeah, sure. So
Principal
I think it's
Richard.
good. I appreciate the question. In my past experience as a middle school principal, having an SRO, in a previous work life, right? I've never had an officer restrain any student. The past year and a half, I can't envision if I had an SRO, where I would have had an officer restrain a student. And I personally haven't had to restrain anyone for the past year and a half in terms of a kid being out of control. We want to do that verbally. We've been crisis prevention, intervention trained, CPI, so that's the best means. And so I can't, you can never say never, right? But I can't imagine a scenario from my past experience in the year and a half and my previous experiences where I would want a SRO to restrain any student in my school community.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. And so, but you can understand what I'm drilling down to, right? Like why this person as opposed to any other skill. But how do you feel about this third proposal? Do you feel confident in that, or does it have to be an SRO?
In my past experience, a SRO has been a very valuable member of a school community. It really, so it's like a past experience thing. I've seen kids that make connections with kids, and it's a different thing. And when I think about a broad middle school program, when I think about diversity in terms of like different types of staff, I've seen kids make great connections with SROs. So that's why I'm asking for it. I'm asking.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ms. Hastings.
Thank you, because that was one of my questions for Principal Richard. I'm glad you joined us. After our
And
last...
you understand that we do have, we have programs around students' emotional behaviors, right? And
For
so
sure.
what that generates.
I just like if it's
Yeah.
just relationships, that's $100,000 bill I don't want to pay.
Right.
If that's really what it comes down to, and I don't mean to like you have said multiple times this is a position you want,
Yep.
and I acknowledge that, and you're running the school, you know what's best. However, in this budget environment where we are nitpicking roofs, I don't see it plausible to have, this is saving us so much money combining different services. And I think it'll at least meet where you need to be in the meantime until things happen. Sorry. Trying to clarify.
Ms. Hastings has the floor.
Do you have a social worker currently?
We do.
You
Yep.
do, okay.
Yep.
So another social worker would be beneficial, but not necessarily provide the services you're hoping an SRO would
Yeah,
provide?
I think it's a different role, and to me, it's all about relationships, and I do believe having an SRO, when I think about the DCYF reports and those types of things. It's one common person that, kind of ties all that stuff together.
Sure.
Truancy, a variety of different things. So it's just a different
After our
role.
last meeting, I asked Ms. Desmond, who is our grant manager, if there were grants available to
We
help
have-
pay
we have
for-
something for you
Okay, great. Because wouldn't it be great if we could get a grant to cover this for 1 year to see how it works? So, and then we're saving 300, almost 250,000. So, I mean, hopefully this will have some great information for us that Mr. Dunn is passing on.
The only difference in this social worker position that Kara has proposed is that we were looking for someone who has a background in juvenile justice. It's very different than perhaps the social worker, the clinical social worker that we have in our building where they're working with kids and families. The model that is used in Dover and here in Concord, they are social workers by profession, but they have that juvenile background, juvenile justice background, which gives them the understanding of walking into some, as I've been described, some very difficult situations in families and homes and, in terms of dealing with the homeless population and so forth. So they have those skills in terms of that, understanding juvenile justice. So, but they don't arrest people. They don't have that capacity to do that kind of work.
So when I look at this, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 grants that would potentially cover an SRO.
Well, they're potential sources
Okay.
that we could apply for. So we asked Ellen to go back out and see what was out there.
So my experience with most of these grants is that they will pay the first year, but you have to commit to a certain number of years. So it's
Okay.
not like
So it's not like we
try
can
it
try
out.
it.
No,
Okay.
it's like, we'll pay year 1, and then you have to pay X
Okay.
number of years.
And that's
important
exactly what
information to have.
happened when,
Yeah.
back in the 90s, that's the 1990s. They actually had a grant, and it was, you had to commit. You got paid, I think they actually paid for the first several years, but you had to commit a long-term commitment to this SRO. And that was my first experience with them, both at the high school and Derry and the middle school.
So offhand, there are not grants that we could try it for a year and see how it goes.
I suspect that they're going to want a long-term commitment to make that kind of money, to put out that kind of money.
Mr. Richards?
Yes, I just wanted a couple of things. First, as we're discussing, and for anybody who's watching as we talk about these items, we're talking about removing the safety resource officer at Rundlett Middle School, just currently in the budget. And we just want to be clear of that. And that we would be adding, the motion is to add a restorative justice, juvenile justice officer at the Rundlett Middle School. So that everybody knows that this is where exactly we're discussing this. I find this proposal intriguing. Going back a couple meetings ago, I find myself in agreement with Ms. Robinson that this, if we do have a resource officer, I would want it to be a more 50-50 sort of funding, because it benefits not only us, but it benefits our community and the police as well. So there's a lot here to think about, but that's the only things I wanted to add.
Well, I have approached that topic on occasion, and I have not really received the kind of warm fuzzies indicating their willingness to pay for for the city to join in with us to pay for the position.
I think it's also important to note, it's a 75-25 split right now, and it's just based on the days that they're present in the building. So it was a per diem, and they just take all the benefits, everything. They usually give us a bill in November for current year, and then on the bottom it says, this is what we expect for next year for your budget. So.
Ms. Meeker?
I think that it's interesting to me that I think we're all approaching the SRO position differently. For me, I want to make clear that this is not a budgetary issue. This is a philosophical issue for myself. That I think that we owe it to have tough conversations around alternatives to what we've had in the past or what we may assume works. Because we have the opportunity and means to do so. To lean into restorative justice at the middle school means that we are trying progressive things, progressive alternatives to standard discipline practices at middle school. So I feel that this is very much in the same vein of that philosophy, which is that there are absolutely social workers, case managers, people who are trained in juvenile justice, criminal justice. They understand the legal framework. They, maybe they were at some time pursuing a police officer career and then diverted to serving youth. Those are the people I want to talk to. I have no idea if they're even around. This is very much a TBD situation. But given that we don't have grant money, given that we don't have buy-in on an equal playing field with our community police officers, and given that these positions do exist and we have a chance to seek out that talent pool, this for me is a philosophical choice. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn, I just wanted to go through some of the math and the positions. In our staff reductions, we had the restorative justice coordinator at RMS that we were reducing general funds for, but I thought we were doing a budget. We were doing
70-30 split.
We were doing a grant for
70-30 split.
So this would be 2 restorative justice people at the middle school then, is what I'm trying to understand.
Under Ms. Meeker's presentation?
Do we not still have in our budget a restorative justice person at the middle school?
No, there's a 0.7 in a grant. That's-
0.7 grant for a restorative justice person.
Correct.
That was my question.
Yeah.
So we still
And it's not
have-
approved yet, it's just, we carried it in there, but we won't know until sometime in April whether
Okay.
that's,
So potentially part of this position could be paid for by the same grant?
Yes.
that or more, yes.
Part of yours.
Yes, and sorry to appreciate the question. That was part of our discussion.
Okay.
Is what that would look like, but since it's a grant-funded position, sort of rewriting that position to accommodate someone with a juvenile justice background was kind of a question mark. So the proposal just moves forward without acknowledging the grant.
Is the $100,000 a reasonable salary and benefits number for a social worker? It seems a little on the low side, honestly.
I think it would depend if you wanted to support it with the grant. If you wanted
So we
to
could
support it with like Project Aware, then we would use a portion of that 100 to do it, but 100 itself, no, likely not.
That's my
Yes,
question. How
no.
much would, we have $100,000, does that get us a person or not, a full-time person?
In the general fund?
Yeah.
Likely not.
Thank you. So what is the number for a person in the general funds?
Isn't it like 120?
Well, person and benefits, so.
Well, the DIJ position was 85,000. So then you add all the benefits, you were at
Well, what's our current
136.
social worker?
Wide range,
Depends, yeah.
Wide range.
based on experience. And likely, as we've talked about that, you're going to get into master's degrees and higher
So,
salaries.
I mean, before we could
Yep.
vote on this,
Sure.
I think we need real numbers.
Sure.
And then, and whether we can use the grant or not, or make it contingent on the grant, but like $100,000 doesn't get us this position.
I think that's really the question for you is what, if you're good with the grant, the 100,000 is enough because we'll have a grant and use this as support.
Is the grant guaranteed? I thought we just.
Well, we wouldn't know till April.
We
That'd be,
wouldn't know
yeah.
in April. So
yeah.
you would budget this with grant support, pending grant support.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just a question for the board because we could budget this and then have nothing.
Right. And then toss it back in the general fund and go back to square one.
Well, no, if
You
we
would-
voted to eliminate the resource officer and the director of DEIJ for this new position and the grant doesn't fund this new position, then we wouldn't have any of those 3 things.
Correct. And we would have to go back to the drawing board. We'd
Right,
have
we
to
could
figure
op-
something out.
We could open the budget up again in
Yeah.
October, but then
Right.
would require 7 votes. So
That does
I'm
not make
just, I
sense.
just want to make sure
Yeah.
people are aware
Of what the following steps are.
Alternatively, it could be in the next budget.
Or it could be in the next budget, yes. Ms. Meeker?
So I do want to say that the director of DEIJ, the proposal is to essentially put that on hold because we have the audit being done by the Great Schools Partnership. So it's
You
not.
can refine the position, right?
Exactly. So hopefully part of their analysis is refining what we need in a director of DEIJ moving forward. So I just want to acknowledge that there is work being done in that line item. I just don't think it's necessary to budget for the DEIJ director this year. And I was stalling to give Kathleen a chance to weigh in here.
A couple of things on this. The DEIJ, as you know, we're doing the audit.
Yep.
I don't expect any results until the fall, and then we can begin to talk about it. I think this is the right move for you, so there's no point to putting it in there. But remember, you have money right now in the budget under your restorative justice person at the middle school. There's money in there. It was on, the DEIJ money is there, 136. You're cutting it, but by moving that money, you're just technically moving it over to the restorative justice juvenile position. You're just moving it to that, using that money. It hasn't changed anything. The part that may change is it may have a greater, may reflect the grant money. So if we get that grant, which I'm fairly certain we will, that you'll be able to reduce that number. So it isn't, you still have a savings of 137 because, the money that you have.
Well, I just want to, will you go back to the sheet that shows, so I think this is the issue right here, Kathleen, that the 0.3 FTE that we had for the restorative justice coordinator, we're taking it out. So all that's left of the funds is grant funds that will likely come through in April. So I think that might be, I think that's the point that's being made, which is actually that we are reducing.
You are going to reduce that.
So in order to maintain that FTE, we'd have to put that 33 back in the budget.
Right.
And that would cover, that would essentially handle what Pam is saying, which is that we have enough of a buffer to cover benefits should we find someone. So we would have to make a separate motion to put that 33,000 back.
But it wouldn't be for, it would be for a different position. So-
right.
So, yeah, it's just like there's a lot of moving pieces here, and so, and I just, we could end up with nothing. And, I was ready to vote to remove this resource officer anyway, so that's, but I just want to make sure that, in all these moving pieces, we all end up someplace that we're okay ending up.
I would say I would rather have nothing than the wrong thing, than spend money on the wrong thing.
Yes, okay.
We're not going to end up with nothing. We're ending up with $100,000 if we
Right.
don't do that. So
Yeah.
that's, so
But we might not be able
But
to
I-
fund a position for 100,000.
we may not be able to fund a full position with that, but I'm inclined to accept this compromise that Ms. Meeker has put out there to addressing the needs without going with the original proposal.
Any further discussion? All right,
So can I just get clarification? We're going to take away the student resource officer for 101 and replace it with a restorative justice / juvenile justice coordinator or officer for 130 something?
well, we're funding 100 in general funds, but the thought is that
It would be more like 130.
It would be general funds and grant funds. And that we would be eliminating 136 for the DEI coordinator.
Would it be, I'm asking these two now, would it be appropriate to amend my motion to increase, to change the line item for the restorative justice, juvenile justice officer to 136,000? And then if the grant doesn't come through, we have enough for a position.
And you're covered.
And then if we don't spend it, we don't spend it.
You don't spend it.
So the total savings would be $100,000.
I mean, I would be more comfortable with an approach like that, but, I mean, at this point, I would be more comfortable asking the administration to come back with leave the DIJ salary in the budget and have the administration come back with a proposal that might meet those needs and that we're discussing tonight.
You mean the new position?
The new position. I don't know that we have to do all of these steps in order to dedicate that money to a different type of position.
Because you're saying we have.
If we had the money in the budget,
Right,
we could
right.
just leave the money in the budget and
Leave
just
the money in the budget.
and
I
not
guess that was my point before.
not do multiple steps.
Right, just
Okay.
leave that money in the budget. It covers that position of restorative justice, juvenile justice officer slash, and you have it. I'm much more confident about the grant because of the conditions that they have indicated to us, and as I meet with Ellen. And so I feel pretty confident that that money will still be there, but we will have to rewrite the job description a little bit. So that was the reason why everybody was.
But we can use the money from the
That's right. That's right.
$136,000 that we have in
Right.
the budget this year.
So you're actually just moving it to that new position that you're adding, but you're eliminating the title of DEIJ director.
And is that a necessary step that we have to vote on?
Well, that's
Maybe we don't, or we just take
That's
that
what
off.
it-
Well, the only thing you have to vote on is your
Is the
SRO
SRO.
officer, because
Yeah.
that was presented and that is in the budget.
All right,
This
so
is why I don't make motions in bulk, guys. So I am going to withdraw
okay.
my motion to make way for alternative motions regarding these personnel changes.
I will make a motion.
Yes, Ms. Robinson.
I move to remove the safety resource officer line item for the middle school from the budget in the spirit of pursuing a restorative justice juvenile justice officer at the middle school using the funds that would have been allocated for the director of DEIJ.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Maker. Discussion.
I mean, I'd like a chance to think about this a little bit more.
And
You could certainly move to table it until Wednesday.
And then I'm just saying, so we would then retain the DEIJ director position and still have this contract that is out there that we were paying for because we're not filling the DEIJ position?
We have a contract with Great Schools Partnership now, so that's already accounted for. What my motion is proposing is that instead of using these dollars that would normally be allotted for a DEIJ director, instead of spending it on that, because we need to rewrite that whole position, we don't even know what we need, so we're having an equity audit. We'll take that money for 1 year and use it to apply to a restorative justice juvenile justice officer in the expectation that we wouldn't have any grant money to help us with that position. However, Kathleen's very confident that we would potentially get those dollars, so we would wind up having a larger savings. But since the money's already line itemed, it's already allocated, we don't have to do a ton of stuff, all I'm asking is that we get rid of the SRO line item, which saves us $101,654.
So essentially, you are just, this whole discussion is coming back down to just removing an SRO.
Yes.
Yeah, essentially. And
That's
exploring a
The
different.
motion on the table.
Yeah, exploring a different option.
Yes, Ms. Hastings.
I appreciate the conversation, and I want to be sure that we do something for the middle school this year. They have asked repeatedly. I think my concern at this point is that Principal Richard has come to us for the last couple of years asking for this position. And I know that we have all felt the frustration of being on the board and having people come and talk to us about what we're doing and asking for, but not really understanding what the need is, and that we understand because we do it every day. And Principal Richard is coming to us and asking for this position as an SRO. He has done it repeatedly. He knows what he needs. And we can have our philosophical differences with it. But I feel that in that event, we're saying, well, we know what you say you need, but this is what we really think you need. And it's going to cost us a little bit more if we don't get we're willing to pay $30,000 extra if we don't get the grant to give you what we think you need, not what you, who have boots on the ground and are doing it every day, think you need.
Yeah.
And so I am very reluctant to cut the safety resource officer for those reasons, but also understand we've got to do something for Rundlett.
Ms. Robinson.
I think that something that is a little lost in this conversation is that there's still a large contingency of students in schools who don't feel comfortable with an officer, and I believe that school spaces should be a place where kids are focusing on learning. I have lots of friends that are public defenders, and it's the same families over and over and over again, generationally. Our police department knows what families they're involved with. These kiddos are already involved in the justice system. Why does school have to be one more place where they're watched by a cop? That may come across as a little crass, but I struggle with policing within school walls that our budget is paying for. And that's my philosophy. If our police officers want to be in our schools, they're very welcome to, but I want them to pay for it, not us.
I understand what you're saying. I need to make that statement.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hear you.
And I appreciate your comment. I do think that we are the policy-making board for the district, so it is somewhat our job to say that this is what we're going to invest taxpayer dollars in, whether it's world language or school resource officers. I think this year's explanation was better, but there is still no real case that I'm comfortable with of why we need an officer over something else. I will say that I'm not totally convinced that we need this new hybrid position either. And I do worry that, like, if we're we would be creating a Rundlett specific position from what had been a district wide position, and that would be a loss to the district. And a Rundlett specific position that the Rundlett isn't really asking for. They don't want they're clear, they want a police officer. We have philosophical differences on that. We did add a social worker last year, and we're, they still want a police officer. And, I understand the sense of security that gives people and why that would be important to them. I share some of your concerns about, whether that's what we need in our school buildings. And that's why, so you're on the school resource officer part, I'm with you on your motion. You're sort of like,
I mean, if I need to reword it,
then we do this, and I think that is worthy of further discussion. I would like to see what the grant is. I'd like to see what the position is
I'm happy to
before
amend
we
the
get
motion.
to,
Yeah.
we're going to get rid of the DIJ director, because I'm going to tell you, the budget's not going to be that much better in 2 years when we're talking about
Yeah.
adding back another position.
Yeah.
Mr. Richards.
So, given all of this discussion, given the fact that we don't have a definition for that juvenile justice officer, and the fact that we don't intend to fill the DEIJ position until after we get that, I would think we remove all of the positions at this time and then make it a project for this board, or the one leading up to next one, to spend a little more time and in depth looking at what we really want to have to fulfill this need.
But then Rundlett gets nothing again.
Rundlett
I
got a
would-
social worker last year, though. They didn't.
But they
I-
still need help. We're still hearing the reports that
They
need.
want a police officer. They
And
don't
I
want
also-
But you were right, that they would not get any additional things
Right.
this year.
My only concern with that is that if you do not use grant money, you're not going to get it again. So maintaining that position and maintaining those grant dollars would be essential to helping us pay for this position and not have to use that full 130. So I would much rather, continue to parlay with that grant and continue a position so that we continue to receive those dollars. Am I accurate in that?
But wouldn't you just add back to .3 then for that?
Right, you could do
And
that.
do
You
that.
could do the .3 in your budget, but you still have, right now, today, 70% of the position over at Rundlett, that is the restorative practice coordinator, remember? That's one of we felt like we wanted to support the kids at Rundlett, that middle school age. We talked a lot about that last year. I felt like that was a good place to help kids process and deal with some of the things that happen with, with all of the differences in the school and kids adjusting to each other. That was really important to do, and I think that has to continue. Taking that away, I think, would be a disservice to the kids over there. I really do.
So, Superintendent, for clarification, in the budget we are considering, right, that .3 as well as the proposed .7 is what we're counting on for this next year.
Right now, we have 7.7 comes out of our grant, our Project Aware grant, and .3 is in your budget, current
I
budget.
wouldn't have a problem with keeping the .3 in the budget.
We're not reducing .3 in the budget.
But you've removed it.
Well, we
It's
haven't
not
removed
listed
it.
here. It's listed here.
Here.
So it's still slated for removal.
It was
That's
a
right.
proposal to remove it.
That's right. It's proposed to remove.
Oh, okay, so it's not proposed by you, but proposed to be removed?
Yes.
Okay, so I would leave that as is, so that you do have that position, and then I'd remove all three of these and
So we-
refer it to the committee that needs to really seriously look at this and what we need this summer.
So we
Or so to
would
do.
have to vote to put back in the .3 general funds because that was.
That's correct.
That is missing from the budget that administration presented to us.
That would give me an opportunity to spend some time from the moment you pass this budget to begin to develop what that looks like, the job description, all of the pieces, so that you better understood what that person would be doing, including understanding juvenile justice, if that's something
So
that
the
you approve.
motion, so that, the motion on the table is on whether to remove the safety resource officer from the proposed budget.
Can I make a motion to table this,
You
or do
may
I have
make a
to wait?
motion to table.
That
And
tabling
it is,
motion
and
trumps
it
other
is,
motions.
yes, so, is there a second to the tabling motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Campbell. All those in favor of tabling this motion to Wednesday?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Or no?
Can I get a roll call? 'Cause
That's a 5-3.
Yeah, I can't tell.
All right, on the motion to table, Ms. Boucher.
Yes.
Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Hastings.
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
No.
Ms. Sadowski.
No.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
And I am a no, 6-3, that passes.
All right, so the motion to remove the safety officer has,
What am I gonna bring to help you next Wednesday? I'm sitting
I
here
think
thinking.
people just need a little
They
time
just wanna think about it.
to process.
Talk about this in a
Okay.
second.
All right, because I want to have
And,
that
you
prepared
know,
for you.
and
It's a big decision. I
Yeah.
think.
No, it's legitimate. We can wait until Wednesday to vote on this. I'm fine with that.
I will not be here on Wednesday. Just so
Okay.
Any other discussion, amendments on this at this time? We can do additional on Wednesday?
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm status quo with everything so
We're
far.
status quo at the moment,
Just making
Mr.
sure.
Dunn.
That's what I understood, but, all right, I'm gonna move on to some other things. Okay, response to public comments. We pulled just a couple things out just to highlight. First, we'll just talk about trusts and reserves. And I just want, in front of you is the S&P Global Ratings. It says Ratings Direct, and we just highlighted a couple things in there for you that we just want to, what those reserves do for you. First on page 2, and I highlighted them. It says, at the end of this paragraph, talked about our planning. Nevertheless, we believe it is well-positioned to manage any challenges due to its conservative budgeting practices, and we do not expect any material changes to its financial profile. Okay? So stability and conservative budget practices. Track record of conservative surpluses and maintenance of very strong fund balances. Standard management practices with some forward-looking planning and monthly budget reporting. And I think I want to highlight the downside scenario under Outlook. It says, if the district were to experience significant budgetary pressures resulting in draws and reserves with no plan to restore, we could lower the rating. So I just want to highlight that because you've been doing this since 2005 with these facilities and maintaining this, and it gives you the ability to swap. It's fine, pull out and add back in, but you start depleting that, it will affect borrowing, and it's bigger than the middle school, in my opinion. because there's going to be other things in the future. All right, so I just wanted to highlight that as it relates to S&P. And this is as recent when you just borrowed for the HVAC, dated September 5th, 2024.
So Jack, can I just add something to that?
Yep.
And I know a lot of times when people think borrowing, they think millions and millions of dollars. This could, if we start withdrawing large amounts from our reserve funds and it does impact our S&P rating, even something as simple as having a corporate card that's paid monthly, right? A lot of times government entities, including school districts, will get money back if they use a corporate card and it's paid off. So they don't pay interest, they actually get money back, right? We would be doing this board and this district a disservice for the future because we could be hurting our credit rating for even something as small as that, where we couldn't do something as simple as that. So keeping those reserves is a lot more than just having money in a savings account. It impacts so much. So thank you for bringing this.
No problem. So second item, the van to non-CDL proposal. I say that purposely now because you'll see in the third bullet, quote, vans is used in the vernacular sense, not the legal definition. So I apologize for using the term van. I usually look at anything less than a big bus that requires CDL as being somewhat of a van. So we are now going to call either CDL or non-CDL to make that clear. But 14 passenger buses are yellow, and we can get what they call 9+1 or 10 passengers, and they fall within the regs as well. Everything we're going to propose to you will fall within the NHTSA, or the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. So it's not that we're running out and buying 15 passenger vans and run around. There's an advisory on that. You can't do that. So we're going to meet with compliance, and it's just trying to tuck that in. So I appreciate people bringing that up, but we'll just be clear in our language, especially as we go into negotiations. CDL, non-CDL, that's simple. And as far as buying for federal funds, there is a van out there that you may see that's tan. It has a little bus flip-flap and signals. That was bought with Title I funds. So you can, and that's an 8-passenger van, but that's used to transport students, okay? So let me see if I can. And then the middle school project, I think there'll be some discussion at the monthly board meeting about setting an April meeting for capital facilities and
Actually, the April meeting for capital facilities will be before our April 7th.
So we'll have to send that out. Yeah, the executive committee set that out. So there'll be some things, but other than that, again, in this budget, we have done nothing in that as it relates to the project. Okay. And then finally, just some things things that are not budgeted, but potential impacts that have come up recently, and we're working on ways to mitigate that. First is the HighSchool Culvert. That was budgeted in your summer money, but obviously when they start digging into the ground, hopefully we don't find any surprises, but Matt's on it. He does a great job with it, but we just want to highlight it because you start seeing a trench and excavators. Some people translate that into dollars, and it does translate to dollars, but hopefully it's not more than what we're, thinking. Electrical panel. So Matt will speak to that, but there is an electrical panel at the high school as we're doing the ramp up for the HVAC. The vendor of that panel that was put in the 90s had come out and made some comments about it. I have a picture on the right that Matt did of the panel, and then a sample of some things. So I'll let Matt speak to what that was made. This was made to us available a week or two ago.
I refuse to believe those are real.
I see those push buttons and I think of Jurassic Park where the woman's going down and flipping them open. But anyway, so I'll let Matt speak to what we're.
So on the right, just briefly on the right-hand side, that is one of the main breaker panels. It's a 3,000 amp breaker. So if you look. See the little gray part there? There's a handle, and I'm not trying to get technical, but I have to in this case so people understand. In order to shut power down on that, you have to reach in, pull the handle out, and turn it. Schneider, as a part of Square D, which is the brand you see up there, they had a flaw in that design, meaning that handle, when used for maintenance or whenever you had to cut power, the handle would break. It's a hard plastic. They discontinued. It's called a Legend switch breaker. So when they came by, as Jack said, it was Snyder Electric. They saw that and they go, oh, wow, they still have that. That's been discontinued since the early 2000s. It's true.
Man, Matt.
So what they recommended is a couple of options. One, swap it out. We're putting a whole new 17 dehumidified air units on the roof. So if that, you can leave it as is, but if that fails and they've been known and prone to fail, then you're going to be in a heck of a risky predicament that things will shut down and you'll have to replace that breaker. So as part of the summer project, we are having to cut power to the building so that we can convert over the power to run the equipment on the roof. It's not the kind of thing you want to do to kill power to that school, especially because our IT, all of our server rooms feed right through the heart of that building. So the recommendation is to replace it. What you see on the left is a arc flash safety device. So it's mandated by code anyway, so it would be a two-part conversion in order to do this. So,
How much, Matt?
Yeah, that's all our question.
yeah, and it was shocking. It was in a range of about 150 to about 200,000.
Well, we just gave you that.
So
Yeah.
this is coming. No, I know.
I did not know that in advance. I just want to be on the record for that.
I do, and we're bringing it to our attention. It was noted, like I said, from CSI Engineering and a representative from that company.
If there was a flaw in the design, did they do a recall? Should we have been notified? Should they have
I asked
replaced
that
it under
question.
their own dime?
Yeah, why don't they?
They realized that in the early 2000s. So I've asked that question, and we're going back again to continue to ask, but they think that window is closed.
Oh, on an
convenient
auto
for
recall,
them.
it's whenever you take your car back in after they've admitted to it. So I think that window should be open. But I'm not an attorney.
Again, it was a very cautionary. They said you could stay there last 20 years, or with the power on and off that you have to do, if that breaks,
Then you have
you're
to
going to
replace
be,
it no matter what.
you're going to have to replace it anyway. So almost like a pay me now, pay me later. But as I look at what we're doing for the school and putting in that HVAC system upgrade,
So Matt, your
I'd hate
point
to do
is
that,
that
and then-
it's better to replace it on our terms when we plan it, as opposed to waiting for it to break and having to replace it at that point.
Because if you give us
That's kind of
the-
what you're telling us, right?
That's exactly what I'm telling you, because if you authorize us to do it, we get the order, we get the part in, we're shutting the school down from power anyway, regardless. So that's the time to do it when everything's shut down.
I think the only question that when Matt and I were going back and forth and meeting with various vendors was that if it fails, does that mean the building does not come back up? And I think that's our understanding. If that reset switch fails and it breaks, the
Well, it's
building will not
the
power. Portions of that building will not power back on. And that's what we don't want to be in a position, because then you got to shut the building down in order to replace this. So
That might have made our earlier discussion a little quicker. If we had
Yeah, man. Sometimes you don't know the range, but lawns are electric.
Yeah, I'm kind of guessing that Matt's prioritization, I don't know if Ms. Meeker had great foresight, it seems like right at this point, but to just let him make that decision, he's telling us that this could be his priority.
I'd rather bring it to everyone's attention,
It's okay.
because it was brought to our attention when they did the walkthrough.
We're working on ways to mitigate
Yeah.
it. We
Thank
just
you.
wanted to let you know. Nothing you need to do at the moment.
Good luck
The
with that.
shutdown's not till, I don't think the shutdown's till June.
It's going to be in the
Right.
summer.
Yeah, so
We don't have an exact.
we'll work through this over the next couple of weeks. It's something we just found out in more so last week when we sat down to say, start pressing these issues. And then, when you do that button over there is because of potential a code change, as we've talked about in middle school. Okay, well, now that you're bringing that panel up to date, you also got to do this. So we're trying to learn and understand. What do we absolutely have to do?
So, Mr. Cashman and Mr. Dunn, the Capital Facilities Committee looks very much forward to hearing more about this at our next meeting.
Correct. Like Jack said, we just heard about it last week.
Okay?
I'm sure you loved hearing that.
And next, our ongoing project, as you know, ElectricalCharges. So, yeah, did you guys forget about that?
I did
No,
not.
you didn't? Okay, that's good. All right. Well, this is just giving you an update. So,
Mine like a steel trap.
as I was waving to Ellen leaving tonight, as we check almost daily on whether we're getting the funding or not, we still do not know. So hence, we did not put anything in your budget to install those chargers. We're holding tight because we don't know. We also didn't outlay the money. We have made it with a parachute that if we don't get the funding, we can cancel the buses. The buses are on order, about 8 to 12 months. We are getting quotes to install up at the conf, and that is a lengthy run. It's a 350 to 400 foot run, so it's fairly expensive to install. Our plan is to put two 60 kilowatts side by side with duals on each side. But we're getting multiple quotes from vendors including the city works with and has on standby, so that we can have a range of what this could look like. Our plan is to pay right now for the chargers. If you remember, there was an accident a few weeks ago on a bus. They totaled that bus. I've earmarked that money aside to pay for the chargers instead of replace the bus. So we got that check already. So that'll take care of that.
Jack,
It's
I would
just
love to spend time in your brain, man.
lots of explosions. So the next piece is this, and that is going to be equivalent to that switch.
Okay.
So you know, all right.
All right. Cool.
But we're pending right now. If you have anything else, I know we're a little over time.
Vans, I guess, or non-CDL.
Non-CDL?
Vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, we have all expense and no savings from that in our budget. And, I know that's the best case scenario, that we're hiring all the drivers and that you're not planning to go out and buy 10 non-CDL compliant vehicles until you know whether you can hire people and things like that. But, we're going to, and it's a trust fund expense, but we're going to carry it in our budget with no offsetting savings. I just want to open that discussion, see if we have any updates from anyone.
Well, we have to negotiate the non-CDL track.
Yes.
So that is coming. I have that on Wednesday. So that is that component. And obviously, we're pushing out the new rates that you have agreed to. And I recall, I believe there are 2 new drivers. So it's a help. But it's really ramping that piece of it up and trying to use what we have. We have the 4 non-CDL buses. And I am also exploring the idea of any of the older CDL buses. Would it make sense to trade them in and try to get non-CDL and just move to an all non-CDL fleet of 15 passenger instead? So it's a conversation, daily?
By the hour?
But it's trying to balance, do we make them the non-CDL vehicles available to get the drivers, or do we just try to do this? We're going to do them both as we go. And I've even got a lease price to be able to say, I want to try it for a year so that I could get them and just try that without making the commitment of buying them.
Nice.
It's just trying to figure out what does the workforce look like?
Right.
Because if we can't get them, all this is for naught, and that money's going to wind up going towards outside services.
And as Jack said, it's a daily kind of, it's every day. We walk by each other and do that. And, but I've also been talking to, the other districts, like I said I would do, and we're not getting a great response right now from some of our vendors who they're in the same boat. Like, do they have the drivers? So the commitment to a contract or things like that right now has been a little bit the start of a conversation to look at some consolidation with the districts. But right now, our vendors are in the same boat. Like, we don't want to commit to us that they're going to have enough drivers to be able to expand and do some of these things. Hasn't been an easy conversation
I mean,
right now.
I think we know that even if we were handling more of our own needs, we'd probably see some savings and it would be worthwhile. But, you know, and I'm comfortable leaving the money in and allowing some flexibility. There are some things like, I'm not sold that we need to buy new software and to hire 2 new people for transportation.
Right.
Like
Correct.
we just bought transportation software, so I feel like that's, you know, so those are things that, you know, I want to make sure that there's greater board discussion before we start doing some of those
Correct.
things.
You'll know as we go. Because right now, we know what we have for stock, except we have 12 small of that, and of that, what is it, 7 are CDL and 4 non-CDL. And then there's the trainer, which makes it 5. But then you also have the open driver positions that are current.
Yep.
And right now, I think they're down 11 or 12 drivers. So that is already stuff budgeted before we hit that million.
Right.
So we're trying to get that piece of it up first, hence why we did the midpoint negotiations. And let's see where we need to go based on the drivers that we have come in.
Yeah.
Jack, to reword it, I believe what the president is saying, we'd like to know before you go and be able to get a decision point in there where we have input.
Oh, yeah, before we start touching any of that.
On any of the
Yeah.
moves you're
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
make.
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you can test the concept with existing resources and existing funds, I think that would be great. But yes, before we start spending that million,
100%.
yeah.
Because we know that in your budget is already those 11, 12 vacant
Yeah.
drivers. So
Right.
that's what we're doing. Correct.
Right. I think we
And then
have,
I am all set. Just public information, the work schedule, my same spiel at the end. So it's all up to
I have a quick question about the meeting times.
where everything is and that.
All right, purely
The
selfish
non-public.
question. Is Wednesday a hard stop if the night discussion goes long and any further motions need further discussion? Or do we need to pass the budget on Wednesday?
I mean, a majority of the board could vote, but we start to have cascading problems if we don't pass it, you know, because remember, we can't come back necessarily the next day. It's 2 days before we can come back. And so it's a day that it's Friday night where people are maybe not necessarily available. And we have to, you know, then we're into April, we have to get contracts out too. So I would say, yeah, we really got to get this done on Wednesday, no matter how long it takes us.
And if
Great.
you need remote access, we can make that happen.
I will need that.
Okay. Does that work?
All right, great. And I think there is a request from the administration for a non-public.
We'll make it brief,
We'll make it
understanding the
brief.
time.
I will move that we go into non-public under 91 A3C matters which if discussed in public would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the public body itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. This exemption shall extend to any application for assistance or tax abatement or waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant. Moved by me, second by Ms. Campbell. Roll call, please.
Ms. Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Hastings?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Sadowski?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
And I am a yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Richards. Mr.
Thank you.